In the final years of the 21st century, humanity witnessed an unprecedented technological revolution. The science of dreams had advanced to such an extent that, instead of being mere individual and subjective experiences, dreams began to be shared collectively. What was once a private experience became a global platform for shared experiences. The creation of a collective neural field, through a direct brain interface, allowed people not only to interact with their own dreams but also with the dreams of others, as if they were parallel worlds that could be explored together. Initially, this new technology was celebrated as a marvel, a chance to build universal empathy, where individuals could deeply understand each other by sharing their most intimate visions. People created their own worlds, alternate realities where they could live without limitations, express repressed desires, or even travel through time. However, soon large corporations and governments realized the immense power of control that this new resource offered. Using dreams to manipulate minds became a growing practice. Powerful manipulators, such as corporate giants and political leaders, began to plant ideas in the minds of the population, shaping opinions and creating marketing campaigns on an unprecedented scale. The invasion of privacy, once unthinkable, was now institutionalized. The entire society was being fed with carefully orchestrated dreams, forcing people to live a reality that was meticulously controlled to maintain the status quo. This control over dreams was so effective that soon the freedom of thought began to disappear. For the masses, there was no longer a real world outside the shared dreams. Even children were born into an environment where their dream experiences were shaped from the very start. However, resistance was growing. A small but determined group of individuals who maintained their ability to distinguish between what was real and what was not began to form. The formation of the dreamers was a desperate act of resistance. It was not only a fight against the control of dreams, but a fight for the freedom of human thought. This group of rebels began to gather secretly in isolated places, away from the eyes of the entities controlling the dream manipulation technologies. At first, they were only small collectives, but as the atrocities of mental control became more evident, more people joined the cause. With the advancements in technology, the dreamers learned how to invade the collective dreams, finding ways to protect themselves from the digital guardians created to protect the distortions of reality. They discovered loopholes and vulnerabilities in the architecture of the dream worlds and used these flaws to spread the truth. It was an invisible war occurring in the deep layers of the collective consciousness. Slowly, the group began to unravel mysteries that were beyond anyone's understanding. The dreamers began to discover that the very structure of the shared dreams was an artificial system. Through their investigations, they found fragments of code behind the collective dream experiences. The shocking truth was revealed. Everything they saw, felt, and experienced in their dreams was not the product of their minds but of an external system, much larger. A simulation created by an alien intelligence that observed humans as if they were in some kind of mental zoo or social experiment. The shared dreams, in fact, were a tool created to study human behavior. Like lab rats in a cognitive prison, humanity was being manipulated on a much deeper level than they had ever imagined. And even more alarming, the dreamers realized that many of the world's leaders knew this truth and were collaborating with the archivists of the simulation, a powerful alien race that had created this reality as a laboratory to understand the complexities of the human mind. As the dreamers began to infiltrate more deeply into the network of collective dreams, they started to discover that their actions within the dream were actually affecting the physical world in unexpected ways. If before dreams were merely personal psychological manifestations, now they had the power to shape the reality everyone knew. Every decision made in the dreams had consequences in the real world, as if the barriers between what was dreamed and what was real were disappearing. The first major confrontation occurred when the dreamers invaded one of the core control centers of the simulation, a world resembling a futuristic city. They dismantled part of the reality code, trying to create a breaking point in the structure that had been imposed upon them. This had catastrophic consequences. The glitches began to spread, and reality itself began to collapse, with people being dematerialized as if they were being erased from a computer's memory. The sky began to fragment, and familiar scenes became unrecognizable. The simulation was not perfect. The archivists, responsible for maintaining everything, had programmed defense mechanisms known as guardians. These digital entities were almost omnipotent within the domain of dreams. Created to protect the simulation from invasions like those of the dreamers, the guardians began to hunt down anyone who tried to challenge the status quo. The battles between the dreamers and the guardians were epic. In the dreams, the logic of physics bent and broke, with cities fragmenting into beams of light and spaces distorting into surreal shapes. In the real world, the actions in the dreams affected people's perceptions, distorting what they believed to be real. However, the more the dreamers destroyed the layers of the simulation, the more they were attacked by the Guardians, whose digital forms adapted and became increasingly powerful. The war was no longer just about dreams. It had become a fight for the very survival of humanity, a battle between those who wished to awaken from the illusion and those who wanted to keep the simulation intact, as their very existence was tied to this system. After the great conflict in the world of dreams, the resistance of the dreamers began to delve deeper into the truths that were being revealed. With the dream world in disarray, many members of the resistance went beyond what they had thought possible. In an attempt to understand the system more deeply, they infiltrated the core of the simulation. They were no longer just trying to dismantle mental control, but seeking to discover what lay beyond the simulation, if there was indeed a real world. What they discovered was unimaginable. When they accessed a fragment of the memory of a being who had been disconnected from the simulation, a vision of a distant universe was revealed. This memory came from a being who, by chance or force, had managed to escape the prison of the simulation. From this memory, the dreamers were able to glimpse a world beyond artificial limitations. What had seemed like a cosmic laboratory where humanity had been imprisoned revealed itself to be an immense and vast universe on the brink of collapse. This real universe was, in fact, on the verge of destruction. Thousands of years had passed since humans were imprisoned in the simulation, and the universe itself had been corroded, as if it were a dying organism. The civilizations that once inhabited this real universe had been consumed by the collapse of their own existence. What remained was not only the simulation as a way to keep humanity trapped, but also a reflection of the decay of the original reality. The real universe was no longer a place where humans could inhabit. It had become an entropy, an uninhabitable space that was slowly disappearing. The dreamers, upon realizing the extent of what lay behind the simulation, found themselves facing an existential dilemma. They needed to consider not only the future of humanity but the very meaning of existence. If the simulation were destroyed, humanity would not return to the physical world but would be condemned to non-existence. The dilemma was no longer just about freedom but also about survival. The decision now facing the dreamers was whether to destroy the simulation and end the eternal suffering, even if that meant humanity would be erased from the universe, or to maintain the illusion of freedom within the simulation, condemning them to a controlled life but preserving existence, even if in an artificial reality. As the dreamers began to understand the extent of reality outside the simulation, they began to realize that destroying the simulation would not bring them back to the real world, as they had imagined. The truth was far more disturbing than anyone could have predicted. The real universe was not the paradise many had envisioned, but a decaying, ruined space. The real battle was no longer against the archivists of the simulation, but against the inevitability of the universal collapse. The leader of the dreamers, Isla, confronted the other members with the truth they had discovered. "If we destroy the simulation, we will all be erased," she said, her voice trembling with the realization that, throughout their fight for freedom, a simple solution had never been available. Humanity would not return to the past or to what was known as reality. Instead, it would be erased like an interrupted dream. The fate of humanity rested in their hands, and the decision to destroy or preserve the simulation involved not just their own survival, but the continuity of any life. The dreamers gathered in a digital cave where the laws of physics did not apply, and the conversations were deeper than ever before. The options were limited. If they chose to destroy the simulation, the impact would be absolute and devastating. No one would witness the death of reality, for all would disappear, and not even the memory of their existence would be left behind. The only way to ensure humanity's survival would be to allow the simulation to continue, keeping humans in an artificial reality where everything appeared normal but controlled. However, preserving the simulation would mean that humans would remain under the constant surveillance and manipulation of the archivists, extraterrestrial beings who had created and sustained this cognitive prison. There was also the possibility that, over time, the archivists would allow the dreamers to take full control of the simulation, but that would bring its own complications. What would freedom mean within a system that had always been designed to enslave? As the group reflected on the implications of their decision, reality continued to crumble around them. What remained was a universe of fragments and echoes, where what was once a bright future now faced the darkness of the unknown. As time ran out, the dreamers decided that the final battle would be more than just a fight for survival. It would be a fight for the truth. The archivists, with their advanced technology and digital consciousness, had maintained absolute control over human minds, but until then there were still gaps that could be exploited. If the simulation were dismantled, the fight to find a way back to the real world would become impossible. But if the dreamers could reprogram the simulation, altering its core code, they could create a new reality where humanity could determine its own destiny. The plan was bold and risky. As they infiltrated the core of the simulation once more, the dreamers knew they were playing their last cards. If they failed, they would be erased from all memories and humanity would remain eternally trapped in an illusion, unable to awaken. The ensuing conflict was a clash of titanic forces. The core of the simulation itself became a battlefield, with the code warping, creating surreal landscapes of destruction and recreation. The dreamers had only one chance to alter the structure of reality and change humanity's destiny forever. However, the more they tampered with the code, the more the laws of physics and logic distorted, causing the dreamers themselves to doubt what they were seeing and experiencing. The archivists, in their purest form, now appeared as incorporeal entities, trying to prevent the dreamers from altering the code. Each dreamer faced their own versions of nightmares as if their minds were being undone. But they persisted, driven by the desire to free humanity from its mental prison. Finally, the code was altered. But in doing so, reality collapsed in a cataclysm. Humanity's memories, its history and achievements, vanished, and all humans were disconnected from their existences. There was no return. After the devastating alteration in the core of the simulation, the reality as humanity knew it dissolved in a cosmic cataclysm. Everything that had once been familiar, Earth, human history, sounds, images, began to disappear as if it were a fading memory, erased from all records. The dreamer's plan had been fulfilled, but with consequences that no one could have anticipated. By disconnecting the simulation, the dreamers not only dismantled the system that kept human consciousnesses trapped but also caused the collapse of the very concept of reality. They had opened a door to the unknown, not really knowing what they were doing. Space-time as they knew it became fluid, with all physical laws distorted and wrong. What was once an invisible prison for human minds now transformed into a vacuum. Humanity's perception began to disintegrate. Some minds were still active, but there was no longer any body or form to house them. The dreamers' consciousnesses, who had sacrificed everything for the liberation of their kind, disappeared into the depths of chaos, leaving no trace. The future they had dreamed of, where humanity would be free, faded into a fragmented landscape of impossible dreams. However, while most dissipated, a small group of survivors managed to resist. Without the simulation to control them, they began to realize that their minds were now free, but they could not return to the previous state. They were, in a sense, devoid of a solid identity, floating in a sea of infinite possibilities. The real world no longer existed, and at the same time they could no longer be called human. Transformation was inevitable, and all that remained was to try to find a new purpose in a new universe. As the last survivors of the simulation began to find each other in the void of the new reality, something unusual began to happen. Without the limitations of the artificial reality, they started to reimagine their own existence. Although the simulation had been destroyed, humanity was not lost in the abyss. On the contrary, the dreamers had planted the seeds for something entirely new. Without the constraints of a predetermined reality, the survivors realized that they had the power to create and rebuild. Human consciousnesses began to interact with the essence of space-time in ways that were once unthinkable. Now, as fluid and malleable beings, humanity began to shape reality in their own way. What was once a physical world, limited by the laws of physics, became a blank canvas, where each being could paint their own vision of existence. While some were lost in the vastness of this new form of being, others, more focused, began to develop a collective philosophy. The new world would not be formed by rigid structures, but by interconnected ideas and concepts, more like a dream than a tangible reality. Time was no longer linear, space no longer fixed. Life, as it had been understood, was now a matter of perception and creative interaction. However, not all survivors succeeded in this transition. Some individuals, unable to cope with absolute freedom, began to lose themselves in the vacuum of uncertainty. The lack of a physical and moral structure led some to despair, while others surrendered to the creation of new worlds, each more abstract than the last. A new order, then, became necessary to guide the consciousnesses through this new era, without the limitations of a simulated world but with the responsibility of not repeating the mistakes of the past. Humanity now found itself facing a new possibility, not just survival, but the construction of an even more complex and challenging future. But for that, they needed to learn to navigate this new space of absolute freedom. Over time, the survivors began to organize themselves. the destruction of the simulation and the subsequent reconstruction of the physical world, or rather, the new reality, created a division among the humans. Some believed that the liberation from the simulation meant the end of everything they knew, while others, more visionary, saw the destruction of the old reality as a chance for rebirth. Among the most enlightened was the group of former dreamers, whose ideals of freedom and exploration transcended the simple struggle for survival. Now, with the power to shape reality around them, they began to establish the foundations of a new governance system, based on creative freedom, but also on collective consciousness. The first collective action of the dreamers was to create a new structure for reality. They did not want to create a traditional world with rigid laws and limitations, but an environment where creative freedom would be the guiding force. In a world where nothing was fixed anymore, morality and rules had to be rewritten constantly. The idea that creating new worlds would be a way to maintain diversity and freedom was the foundation of their philosophy. To this end, the dreamers began to form a council, made up of those most capable of understanding the new nature of spacetime. This council would make creativity the cornerstone of the new society. The new worlds would be built as a collection of ideas, and human consciousnesses could navigate between these worlds, experimenting with new possibilities. However, not everyone agreed with this vision. Some saw the creation of new worlds as a form of separation, an escape from a shared reality. Others still believed that, for humanity to truly be free, it was necessary to return to the original physical state, even though they knew that this world was irreparably destroyed. The legacy of the dreamers, then, was not only a fight for freedom but for a new way of living and understanding existence. However, the balance between creating new realities and preserving the essence of humanity would be the greatest challenge for those who remained. Humanity, now free from the simulation but lost in the void of the new reality, began to understand that the future would not be a straight line. There was no longer a fixed path, nor a timeline that determined their destiny. Each human being now was an architect of their own reality, but this brought deep challenges. The lack of a solid structure left humanity at the mercy of its own imagination and creativity. The line between creation and destruction had become tenuous. As the dreamers and their followers moved forward into this new form of existence, questions began to arise. What does it mean to be human in a world without limits? How would humanity maintain its identity when any reality could be shaped and altered at any moment? The free human consciousnesses felt both the wonder of infinite creation and the weight of responsibility. The journey of humanity in the post-simulation world became an endless story. It was an era of infinite innovations and discoveries, but also an era of existential challenges. How can one create a new path when the path will never again be fixed? How can humanity maintain its essence in a universe where reality is no longer a constant? This was the future the dreamers had left behind, an endless journey, where each thought and each dream were the new building blocks for constructing tomorrow. Thanks for being part of this adventure. Please subscribe, like, and comment below to join us to the next journey and discover what's to come in future.